Kind of hilarious that I had that fight to go to decision based on those two fights. I was like, oh, they're teammates. Who knows? They might be friends. Maybe they're not going to want to beat the brakes off each other. And holy God, I mean, that was one of the more violent fights that we've seen this year.
Welcome back to Against the Cage, your MMA home for all the fight recaps, previews, and exclusive interviews that your heart desires. My name is Jake Arrier. I'm joined here by my co-hosts Scott Fontana and Erich Richter. And we have a little bit of news about the rules of MMA. The ABC conference is going on. Scott, you've been to the ABC conference. Could you explain a little bit what that is and what it's like for those who don't know?
So actually, the conference just wrapped up on Wednesday. And at the end of the conference, which is a collective of essentially, they do it every year, like all these conferences and things do, but professionals get together and do these things. These are all of the regulators from various, state governing bodies, the New York State Athletic Commission, Nevada State Athletic Commission. They all come together for a couple days and they have seminars. They talk about things that they're going to try and change in the sport, or maybe just things that people need to be made aware of year in, year out. There's a lot of stuff about awareness of injuries and that kind of thing. It varies from year to year, essentially. But what they do at the very end is they tend to, if they have any rules changes that they're planning, they will vote upon those the final day, which they did Wednesday, yesterday. And they did pass some updated, revised, whatever your word is, MMA scoring criteria.
Yes, yes. And Scott, as far as MMA journalists with an expertise in judging, certainly an interest in judging, you're at the top of the heap when it comes to that. I mean, you had a podcast about judging for years, right? So I have to
The
ask you.
Couchside Judges.
The Couchside Judges, may it rest in peace. It lives on through the Against the Cage podcast in some form. But I have to ask you, so about this new scoring language that was implemented into the scoring criteria, could you explain to us some of the essentials about what we should know about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some key elements to it. A lot of it really didn't change much, and frankly, it's not going to be a whole lot different than the way a lot of judges were working. But I'll give you the basics that you really ought to know if you had read it before or had heard these explanations before. Essentially, damage is the big deal now. It used to be called impact. There was kind of a language thing. They really just were shy about the word damage, right? In a fight sport, silly. It is now called damage. It's codified as damage. It is officially now a must criterion for judges to score a 10-8. It used to be they had the three Ds: damage, dominance, and duration. Those still exist, but if it used to be years back, you could actually get a 10-8 without necessarily fulfilling a high level of damage. If you had a large duration of time you were winning the round, you could get it that way, as well as if you had large amount of dominance, typically grappling dominance, right? Or in some cases, just being the one who's totally in control of the striking without big damage. You need damage now. If you don't have big damage, if the guy doesn't look like or the gal doesn't look like they have been put through the ringers or have been put through the ringers in the way you saw, you can't get a 10-8. So that's a must. That is the big one.
Okay.
There are, there's some other stuff too that's some really interesting. I don't know if you know what damage means. Let me ask you, when you think of damage, what do you think, Jake?
For me, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is some sort of visible impact on the fighter, but I know that is kind of a rabbit hole, and that can lead to some other art. Like take GSP for instance in the Johnny Hendricks fight, like he looked super busted up. Nate Diaz gets cut up super easy, so I know there's a whole lot of arguments about using that as an indicator.
There's a few things that are now included in damage. What were you say, Eric?
My only thing about the difference between damage versus positional control is, do submissions like play any part of this? I think that's like a conversation that's worth having. Where is there room
Let
for
me get you up to speed then, Eric. Eric, let me get you
Yes.
up to speed then. Here's what damage is, and then you can decide from there. This is now what damage is defined as in our criteria: knockdowns from, quote, legal detrimental strikes, heavy strikes to, quote, vital targets, legal strikes that make a fighter retreat, readjust, or default to defense exclusively, striking and grappling that creates visual injuries like swelling, hematomas, lacerations, or bruising, grappling or sub attempts which hyperextend joints or cause rotational, damage, and lastly, chokes that cause visible distress. That is what damage is.
Okay, so that's incredibly helpful because I mean I've read through the criteria before this language was added, and it's a lot more vague, or it was a lot more vague. So my next question would be: is this new language that's been put into the judging criteria? Is this something that's going to help judges make these kind of decisions, or is it really for everyone else, just so we understand and we're all on the same page about what we're looking at here?
So there's certainly anyone can benefit. That's the obvious answer, but I would say there are probably two elements where it's most targeted at, right? Where it's most important to get that information out to. Because one thing you should understand about this is that again, judges have actually, especially who frequently work the UFC shows, have basically been judging this way already. This is not different. It's just codified. So what we have though is this new criteria written out, clear as day. Anyone can find it on the internet once it's all said and done. Everything they put it where it's supposed to be. This is going to help judges who, let's say, don't work UFC shows a lot. Maybe they're not in conversations regularly with guys like Andy Foster, or maybe some of those other judges who we see week in and week out, the Sal D'Amatos, the Derek Clearys, all these people who frequently work shows. Maybe they don't work with these mostly men, some women, regularly. And this is a good way for that information to get out to them of this is what we want to do if we all want to get on the same page. That's who it's really going to help. But also, fighters and coaches, this is right there for you. This, if you want to know what the judges are looking for, it's this. And that's what you want to coach your fighters into trying to do if you're looking to win rounds and not just get that finish, right? Because sometimes I feel like there are fighters out there, maybe less coaches, but more fighters who are like, well, I'm just going to finish them. That's all. You got to have to try to win the fight too.
Yeah. Scott, I got a question for you. Do you think that this new judging criteria will institute or more consistent 10-7 rounds and 10-8 rounds? Do you think that this will lead to that? Obviously, we saw with Muhammad Yahya that fight, 6 knockdowns, and no one gave it a 10-7. It was a couple that it was all 10-8s. Do you think that this would make it more frequent, or do you think that this is kind of just something for the fans and nothing really is going to change from the judge's perspective?
There will be, I can almost promise you, there is no impact to 10-7s. I think
Okay.
judges are extremely gun shy about giving that 10-7. I've only talked to a handful of judges who would even seemingly really consider it, in terms of some of the rounds that we've really seen that are high level. There are rounds, including that one in particular, that I know that there are judges out there who feel like that would have been a good 10-7, right? But it's not really realistic to expect it. I wish it would. I'm a giant proponent in making this would require new changes, using the 8, 9, and 7 much more differently and more spread out a little more, so that we could have more varied scores that represent what we're watching in a fight a little bit differently, so that you don't have those squeaker rounds judged the same way as like those big rounds that aren't necessarily a 10-8. I would love to see that. That's just not in the cards. But really, to kind of finish off what I was saying before, too, I wanted to make sure we understand something about the criteria here. If it's codified now, it can help anybody who's looking for it, right? But it's going to be, honestly, the onus is on the UFC to help viewers understand it week in and week out. That information has to get relayed, has to get explained and reinforced by the UFC's commentators, frankly. That's who
Yep,
informs the public.
absolutely.
And when you look at the commentary team, who is the ones that we think of are really going to drive that home? It's probably just the Johns, John Anik and John Good, and I'm hopeful everyone will, but we don't always see that play out.
Yeah, and to go off of sort of Eric's question, I know you threw 10-8 in there in that question as well, Eric. And Scott, you mentioned as far as the biggest change, it's that damage being a requirement for a 10-8, not just duration and dominance. Because that's now a requirement, does this, one would think that, you would be a little bit more frugal with 10-8s maybe than before, or is a 10-8 probably still going to be given the same, frequency as beforehand with that new requirement being in there?
I don't think there's going to be any discernible change to 10-8s, frankly, because especially in UFC shows, which is mostly what you're going to be interacting with, right? My hope is that it will increase some awareness on like the regional scene a little bit more and maybe getting them up to speed on what it is. But I think frankly, it's going to be just about the same.
Okay,
Hmm.
got you. And you know what? You were talking about the commentary team, you know, explaining these criteria. I feel like this is definitely something that we could do a breakout episode on. Bring couchside judges back. I remember
In a small way, yeah.
yes, in a small way. At the start of every episode, you would say, "Read that judging criteria," right? Exactly.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to get into, there is one more like change to this that's kind of important is the fact that, and it's really not much different, but it is a little more clear. When judges are evaluating, they're only looking at successful striking and grappling as their primary criteria. It is now separated better in the criteria to make sure that people aren't lumping it in with fighting area control,
And
which is essentially
aggressiveness.
dictating pace, plus, yeah, aggressiveness would be, consistent offense, that kind of thing. People would lump that in as kind of like, oh, well, that's still important. It's really not. And I think they're doing a better job of separating that in this. It's still, you're almost never going to see the judges really turn to that, especially in UFC shows. So don't expect that to happen. But I think now it's just a little more clear.
Okie dokie. Well, Scott, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. Eric, if you have any, do you have any other questions for Scott before we move on?
Nah, it seems like, it's kind of just like officially makes what the UFC's been talking about with the damage and stuff, making that the main priority of judging, of scoring fights. Seems like that's kind of like the main point here, and that sounds about right.
Yeah, it's nice to know
Do you
what
think damage
is
is more clear now?
that's a big thing, I think. And to
Yeah,
your point, Scott, it's I think probably one of the biggest things is for coaches and fighters to understand exactly what the
yes.
judges are looking for. So
I
that
think
is,
the good clarity piece for me was the submission piece, like clear distress. I think is the most important detail of this whole thing. If you were to just cliff note it.
yeah.
That's why
So
I knew when you started talking, I'm like, I'm gonna answer you in
yeah.
just a second, my friend.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Appreciate that.
So once again, thank you so much for that, Scott. And another thing that we have been following quite closely, Eric, as well, is the media rights deal that's been going on with TKO. This week, we heard WWE announced a deal with ESPN. Eric, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the UFC, well, TKO, who owns WWE and UFC, came to an agreement with the WWE and ESPN. 5 years, I believe 1.5, $1.6 billion, somewhere around there. And basically, what's going to be happening is WWE is going to have, they're called PLEs, Premium Live Events, and those are going to be broadcast on ESPN. For the first time, obviously, you guys know that they have a deal currently in place with Netflix for 10 years. So they are going to now be broadcasting on Netflix and ESPN. Now, where have you heard that before? You have probably heard that that might happen on this very show with the Netflix and ESPN. Now, MMA fighting. So Mark Shapiro gave some, comments about this. Said that, they're on the last stretches of their negotiation with, Netflix and ESPN. They're currently going back and forth and throwing out numbers and negotiating and stuff like that. Basically, like Shapiro said that they're on the final legs, and MMA Fighting said that it's imminent. I mean, it was imminent back in July. So, you know, everything that I've heard, everyone that I'm talking to, it sounds like this is going to go through it to end of August, potentially into September. I feel pretty confident in saying that the current structure that the WWE has with Netflix and ESPN, I feel it could be mirrored by the UFC, where they would have like maybe a PLE style deal with Netflix and then also maintain their go-to-market strategy with ESPN, where they would be hosting some events. So that's the latest. The call was interesting. A lot of financial questions, Morgan Stanley and stuff like that. I was really only there to hear about the media rights stuff, but there wasn't a whole lot of updates. I know MMA Fighting ran with some of the stuff saying that, a deal was imminent. I'm not hearing that. It didn't sound
We
particularly
shouldn't
imminent to
hold our
me.
breath, essentially.
Yeah, don't hold your breath. I was told back in July that the deal was going to be done in July. Every time, and I'm like, I was told International Fight Week was announcement week, and it never happened that way. So I don't expect this to happen anytime within the next few days.
That's crazy to hear, especially from what it sounds like on that call from last night. It sounds like Netflix is still in the mix, and
Oh, for sure.
you've been saying that going to a new, streamer this late into the year, like that's got to be a tough challenge. So, uh,
So, yeah, I mean, to piggyback off of that, I had even like the people I was talking to is like, is the deal like done? Netflix is already doing the behind the scenes stuff. And then like they're gonna announce it and like they're just working out dollars and cents, but like the deal's done in principle type of thing. I didn't really get a firm answer on that. If I did, that'd be awesome, but I didn't. Didn't really get a firm answer on that. I'm not sure if the deal's actually done. I mean, maybe call me conspiracy theorist. I think that there's no way that Netflix can put this together in 4 months, considering it would have to be done by January, February of next year, which is when their current media rights deal expires. So. I think that there is a possibility that a deal is already that the framework of the deal is complete. They're trying to figure out maybe the dollars and cents. Some people that I've talked to said that Netflix wanted to do a trial with ESPN with the UFC, do a trial show to see how it would go. And that was talked about in some capacity, but obviously there's been no movement on that. So I would venture to guess that there won't be a trial. So that another potential hiccup in the negotiating status between these three parties who are all jockeying for UFC's looking for money, ESPN's looking for sporting events to put on their go-to-market platform, and Netflix wants to be in the big tier events for fighting. Now, you got to remember, Netflix is a worldwide subscription platform. They are very big in Europe, just as much as they are in the United States. ESPN's mostly just a United States platform, so you have to understand that these like there's a whole lot at stake here, especially for Netflix, who can get into this and really host those overnight those bigger events
E-
overseas.
Eric, I got a question for you. So, are you saying at this point your understanding is those are really the two entities, ESPN and Netflix, who are kind of vying for this, or are there still some kind of dark horses out there like an Amazon Prime or something like that?
Talk to Amazon about it. They seemed pretty much out.
Okay.
Yeah, and talking to I believe TNT was even a part of this, and so was Warner Brothers. Had been discussed, especially by a Sports Business Journal. I haven't heard any movement there either. I would be surprised if it's anybody. I would be shocked, honestly. I would be mind blown if it's not just Netflix and ESPN. I'd be floored.
yeah, you can never say never, but gotta read the tea leaves, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Okay, well, I feel like Pablo Escobar in that one meme, with him just like waiting continuously. So
Yeah.
we'll see, we'll see what happens.
Get ready, dude. You're gonna be in. It's gonna be like the week of football season, maybe Labor Day weekend. That's my
Yeah,
guess.
I don't know. We'll see, man. Alrighty, so thank you so much for that, Eric, and we know that you will be the first one to update us if we do hear anything. So yeah, let's move on to another piece of news this week. Tapology has come out with a new ranking system that's caused a lot of buzz, and the reason is that it's a whole new sort of ranking system that takes out the human element, and it's not like the AI rankings that Dana White has been hoping for with Meta, for instance. But this is a proprietary algorithm that they've come out with that takes a lot of factors that they haven't necessarily completely disclosed, but they have said it takes a fighter's past 6 fights. It ranks every fighter that is active on the UFC roster and spits out a ranking for all of us to see. So I'm sure you guys have taken a look at some of them, but after taking a look at these rankings, do you think that a ranking system can lack any human element? Again, there is zero manipulation or manual figuring out from the Tapology staff on this. So, Scott, I'll start with you. What do you think about a ranking system that lacks any human element in there?
It's imperfect. For in short, right? I'm a big proponent of the Fight Matrix ranking system, which is the same type of thing, right? It's algorithmic. It is not human element in there as well. I like it. what I like is that it goes back to the origins of sport decades back, and it also can rank thousands of fighters in a way that humans absolutely just could not. We can't watch everything, right? This takes that to another level. But ideally, you want to have people in it, especially when you're talking about, let's just say, the UFC roster, which we can all kind of monitor and watch, right? The best system really needs to have that human element because stats and numbers and things they can only take you so far. You need the eye tests to really understand what they're watching. And I think that you could probably still solve some of the issues that I even have with Tapology's rankings, which are a solid attempt, and I appreciate it. But there's some things that it could probably do to tweak that they essentially in their mission statements have said they don't want to do. Like they really don't want to go with recency bias and that kind of thing. So they're leaving out head-to-heads essentially and MMA math because I mean you looked at it, guys. You got Jamal Hills ahead of Khalil Roundtree. You got Brandon Royval ahead of Joshua Van. Like these are no-brainers for anybody who actually watches the fights. That these men did enough to be ahead of them in the rankings.
Yeah, well, Eric, I saw you react to that. What were some of your biggest reactions off of those rankings and disagreements?
Yeah, there's the biggest one I think is the Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree. That one makes no sense. Imperfect's the best way to describe it. There's something to be said for them. There's something to be said for, just a computer just spitting it out at you and seeing what you get. But like even like another one's like Sean Brady behind Joaquin Buckley.
Yeah,
I
that
think that's
one.
like kind of hard to get by too. Like, Joaquin Buckley like lost to Kamaru. I mean, people are iffy on like where Kamaru is at this point of his career as well. Not a lot of love for someone like Brady, who's kind of like I mean, he has that loss to Bilal Muhammad, but that's kind of it. Like he's like really, really done a great job, dominated a lot of his opponents, especially in the last few years. So, for me, it's imperfect. There's a lot of computer science does have a place, especially in MMA, and I think that the UFC recognizes that as well. But it's definitely not the end all be all. You can't have rankings that are official rankings without some sort of human intervention.
There was a quote that I saw in The Uncrowned wrote a story. Ben Folks over there, awesome writer. I appreciate his work. But he interviewed the founder of Tapology, Gregory Sachs, talking about the rankings, right? And Tapology, number one, is also a fantastic resource. So, if you're trying to see, who's fought who and that kind of thing, or what fights are coming up, they are a fantastic record-keeping resource. I can't stress that enough. But there was a comparison that Sachs made, and essentially drawing, the line between, the NFL, you can't just, it's not just about what they did lately, it's about what they've done all season and that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, that works for the NFL, but it
Right.
doesn't work in fighting where to be the man, you got to beat the man, right? If you beat somebody, you're supposed to be ahead of them. That's
Yeah,
just the way it ought to be. So I think Tapology's rankings in their current form, if they are going to keep going with that, and let again like someone like a Joshua Van be behind a Brandon Royval who clearly lost to the other guy, it just doesn't make sense.
yeah, I think that's a good point, bringing up that comparison that Sachs made to the NFL. And you guys honestly probably know more about other sports outside of MMA more than I do, say NFL and NBA. But let's stick with NFL, right? Rankings in the UFC are kind of sort of the same thing as like seeds for NFL teams or say basketball teams in the final or March Madness, say for instance. Like who
Can
is
I give you a good ranking? Can I give you a good
yeah,
comparison to what UFC rankings are?
yeah,
They're not the standings in the NFL. They're the power rankings that people come out
sure,
with every week after the games. So that's where
College
you
football.
see, okay, who's paid college football, similar type of thing. Even like kind of what you said too with the NCAA tournament,
yeah.
the way they will assign them based on their body of work, that actually is closer to the NFL comparison that he's making. And I don't think it quite works as much. We're really talking much more about those the NFL power rankings, or like Eric said and astutely, the college football rankings that come out every Sunday.
Yeah, but to also add on to that, something that Eric can speak to specifically, it's like a ranking. should kind of reflect like maybe the potential odds of like if these two guys fought.
Yes.
Like you can't tell me that if Brady fought Leon again that Brady wouldn't be favored in that fight. So why should Leon
I
be
totally
above
agree with you, dude.
Brady, if that makes sense?
I use
You
betting
go
odds for
first, Eric,
so
because I
many things.
disagree.
You disagree? I use betting odds for so many
To a
things.
point.
Like just in terms of like like who would be favored in this XYZ fight, even if like matchup aside, like who would be favored just straight up. And like that should be able to tell you the answer more often than not, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I would agree with that. It's a big indicator for me. But
Like
what do you got to say to that,
I'll
Scott?
ask you this, Scott, just from a human rankings perspective, at heavyweight, who'd you have rated one versus two, Aspinall or Jones?
I mean, at this point, obviously someone's out of the case there, but if you're just taking away belts and you're just looking at how you would rank them,
Yes.
I would probably put Tom Aspinall ahead, yeah.
Aspinall is favored against Jones in that fight, so proves the point a little bit.
But I want to go back to the point that was made about, how they would do against each other, right? Like there's a certain element to that is not wrong, but also rankings tend to be more about what you've done as well. Because like I think we saw someone like
Okay.
Hamzat Chimaev as a world beater. Like the moment he hit the scene over in Fight Island, right? Like we knew this dude was going places, and I think he would have been favored against probably going all the way up to somewhere around the top five, going back 5 years at 170 pounds. But you can't rank him yet. He didn't do
Right.
anything. So there is a lot of what have you already done element to it. It can be a differentiator, maybe if you see like them as close, that kind of thing. Maybe they've made their case, but it's all based on their body of work and not what you extrapolate that they're going to do next.
That is fair. Yeah. Okay. That is a very good point. But I don't know what to say to that.
I'll take the pat on the back. That's fine with me.
Yes, but I think you could see sort
Sometimes.
of our point there. But I completely
absolutely.
understand the point that you're trying to make. Like say Bo Nickel, just because he was favored minus 1,000 in all those fights doesn't mean you could put him at
That loss doesn't look that bad anymore, by the way.
No, it doesn't. But
It does not.
yeah, it's not like you could put him at number 5 just because he would be, favored against, the 6
Yeah.
and below. So I guess as a point to that, what do you think would make for a better UFC ranking system than what they're using already? Because I mean, we and everyone else has been complaining about how the UFC ranking systems work. To wrap this one up, Scott.
I raised my hand to go first. So, as a former member of the UFC rankings panel many years ago, who I voluntarily left when I joined the MMA which I don't know what that is anymore. But what I would like to see from the let's say a UFC ranking system, right? One that actually is still involving the UFC in some way, as opposed to one that was governing the whole body of the sport, right? I like a panel of 50 working journalists who regularly cover the sport with no exceptions for those who step away from media coverage. You leave, you're out. There's no legacies, right? That would be a giant component. I do like the algorithmic element, though, to be factored in as maybe a minority element. Maybe there's like a percentage of how much that's weighted one way or the other. I think that is still something that can come into play. I don't know that Tapology's algorithm is the one that I love. I actually still kind of favor Fight Matrix, but maybe there's some form of it's proprietary anyway. We're not going to know what that is, right? So,
Yeah.
I would say something like that. You can take out, fighters who, let's say, are suspended for violations like PD use. But one thing that cannot happen, you cannot have the UFC using it as a punitive measure, which has happened in the past. It happened to Nate Diaz. It happened to these people. It can't be something that's a negotiating tactic. It's really got to be about just who's on the roster, who didn't, pop for steroids or something like that, and if you're eligible and maybe you haven't had too much inactivity. That's one thing I like about Tapology. 21 months, you're out. That's inactivity is okay. Take them out for that.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's got to be a combination of the two. I think sort of to round out what you said. So,
Do you have anything, Eric? What do you think?
Honestly, not in terms of like the UFC rankings thing. No opinion. I don't really care about them. They don't have like the big time. They don't have the big time journalists doing it. Like most
I think
people
that would solve the problem. Yeah.
most of the people that were doing it, like I'm iffy if they were even like you said, like there's no legacy votes or whatever. There was like, think about the journalists that were doing it. Like, were they even like really engaged in the sport? Like, obviously the three of us would be fine doing it, but like, who, like, they didn't have any like like anyone who's going to the events isn't really there in that panel.
You
I'd never heard of any of
a
them at
few
least.
years ago, a few years ago, somebody had put out on, I want to say, one of the message boards or something like that. They did like a dive into who the current ranking panel was, and it was like 15 people at this point. I don't even know what it's down to anymore. But it was like, who are they and what they do, and it was actually like a really well done kind of thing for something that just shows up on a message board. I appreciated it. And yeah, there was like a handful, like literally you could count them on your hand, probably less, that were actually covering the sport in a way that you'd recognize. And that's just ridiculous. They can't be the deciders of what people are told are the better ranked fighters. It needs to be better than that.
You need a
If you're
high
taking
quality sample size.
if you're taking it,
Mhm.
if you were taking the ranking super seriously, which doesn't seem like anyone really is, it should be like you, Bond, King, Ben from Uncrowned, Luke Thomas, Chuck Mindenhall, maybe. Like that's who the rankings should be. But since we're not doing that, I don't really care about them.
I'm gonna throw out my guy Aaron Bronstetter too. He'd do a good
There we
job.
go.
Aaron
Yeah,
Bronster, another
give
one. No
legend. Got to give that
disrespect,
guy a
Aaron.
shout out.
But heavy is the head that wears the crown, because if you are the one who's on those rankings panels, then you have to eat the heat for it.
Yeah,
If they don't like your
It's part of
rankings,
the
and not
gig.
everybody wants to deal with that because it's annoying.
I
No, see, I disagree with that though, because if you even look in the NBA writers, they are voting for all NBA votes, which directly affect contracts for the players. And they're able to handle that's way more high stress than just rankings. Like if Zach Lowe doesn't vote Donovan Mitchell third team All NBA like 4 years ago, Donovan Mitchell isn't eligible for a supermax contract, which is like an additional $30 million on his deal. That's like directly tied to dollars and cents. They're able to handle that. I think that the UFC media, if you want to call it that, should be able to handle that.
Well, as a former UFC media member who dealt with that, it's annoying.
Okay, we got a lot to get to, but I think that one thing that we can all agree on is that the ranking system is, might not get a little bit better for a little while. So we'll see what Dana White comes up with that, and then we could talk about it on here. So let's talk about what happened this past weekend in the UFC and the PFL. Let's start off with the PFL. Why don't we, for a change? We've got two new tournament champions, Thad Gene at welterweight, who Eric spoke to ahead of his fight last week, and Movlid Khabibulov, who won the featherweight tournament. And Scott, I'll start with you. What do you think of these new champions, Thad Gene and Movlid Khabibulov? By the way, great fights for both of those.
I mean, I thought the most impressive performance was certainly Movlid Khabibulov, because he really took it to Pinedo in that fight. It was just it was a good fight. It was an entertaining fight. But it was definitely the type of fight where one man asserted that he was better, and not just because he was a better grappler. I mean, he hurt him on the feet. I was really impressed with that performance. That Gene, he had to kind of gut this one out. This was not an easy fight for him by any stretch. But again, I think he's definitely the one who is at least the more star power of the two. He's got a launching point here in a way that Movlid Khabibulov doesn't, because Movlid Khabibulov lives in the shadow of Habib Nurmagomedov, who they will continue to interview in the cage at PFL shows
As much
long
as they
he's
can.
there,
Yeah.
and always overshadow the fighter. And it's
Yep.
kind of silly, but you know what? If they see it as a good way to get a little more pub for their guy, who just banked $500,000 for this season, hey, good for him.
What do you think, Eric?
They see social media views when they see Khabib in the smart cage. That's just what it is.
They're
They
not
see
wrong.
YouTube clips, and that's just how it goes. And I guess at a certain level, I don't blame them. Thad Gene, superstar potential there. Now I believe he's 11-0 now.
Yeah.
He beat the brakes off of Logan Storley those first two rounds. Obviously, first time going 25 minutes, tough spot for him, but he was able, Logan Storley, University of Minnesota, All-American collegiate wrestler, was a state champion in high school. big size disadvantage. We understand that. Storley 5'9" versus Thad Jean 6'2". Thad Jean borderline a weight bully at that weight class and has crazy power in the strikes. Honestly, takedown defense was better than I expected it to be. Was never in real danger. Didn't get smashed. Didn't get ground and pounded. I'm very bullish on him. And the PFL had to be convinced to even make him an alternate. My guy Ian Parker was the one that wanted him to be an alternate. Had to fight for it. And it's crazy to look back on that. It's like the PFL, what are we doing? Like, this is an obvious opportunity here to get in a younger guy. Why is Kevin Lee? And obviously, I know it's a different weight class, but like you're looking at like trying to get a guy like Kevin Lee when I feel like they should be. This is a tournament where you build up younger stars. Good on them for making it happen. Shout out to Ian Parker for finding Thad Jean.
So you were just talking about, Thad Jean possibly becoming this new superstar, and it looks like he's arrived in some sense, right? But something that we've been talking about with the PFL is sort of these questionable decisions that they've been making with their assets. I mean, we've seen this mass exodus of viable champions and high-level fighters from the promotion. Now that they do sort of have something that it looks like they've been asking for in another homegrown star, and I'll throw it back to you, Erich. Do you think that they're going to actually be able to capitalize on this, or are they going to fumble the bag like they may have in the past?
Well, I think the UFC would do really well with Thad Jean, but what's my confidence level in them building stars? Not very high. Um, they've done an okay job with Paul Hughes, not great. I think Paul Hughes has got such a big personality that they should be doing a little bit better. Dakota Ditcheva, however, I'd say they've done an excellent job, so I'll give them credit there. I'm hopeful. How about that? I'm hopeful that they'll capitalize here, but I'm not going to say it's far from a guarantee. I would say, you know,
You
I'm
never
not sure
know.
what'll end up happening here. A lot of it comes down to Thad Gene too. Like it's also not just on the PFL. Thad Gene also has to do his part too, which I think he has.
That's an
But
important note.
yeah,
What about you, Scott? What are
I don't
your
I don't know that PFL look, PFL could do a lot better, right? Like they can build their stars a lot better than they do. That is certainly a valid criticism. I don't know that the UFC is distinctly better at building up stars. I mean, Paddy Pimblett is a star because Paddy Pimblett was a star already, basically. He just
100%.
needed to be known by more people, and you get known by being in the UFC. Just being there is what made him bigger. I don't know that the UFC is doing a titanic job of building new stars for the future either. They're in an issue where really they just kind of have Ilia Topuria, which is obviously I think we're looking at the rise of a big star
Mhm.
there as well, who's got more room to grow. But again, I mean, it's really him. It's Paddy Pimblett. If you want to still consider Alex Pereira a star at this point. I don't know what he is post loss. If he gets that belt back, I think it makes it a lot easier, right? But yeah, I don't know that they're distinctly a lot better at building their stars
That's
either
fair.
in some sort of way. They used to be, but
Right.
that's not really the goal anymore. Dana's a big star. He's a
Yeah.
gigantic star.
Well,
What's
But that's about
funny?
it.
yeah, well, let's keep this hype train going in terms of speculating future stars. Let's pop over to the UFC since we're talking about them. This past weekend, obviously the main event, Tatsuro Taira, he took care of business, held his ranking, defeating Hyun Sung Park. I think I pronounced that correctly. But in the co-main event, we had Chris Duncan taking on, and this is a bit of a harder one, Mateusz Rombeski. There we go, got that one right.
Hey, not bad.
Not too bad.
Oh,
But listen, that was a very, very good fight. Some people would have liked to see that one in front of a live crowd. I would expect it was in the warehouse. But Chris Duncan, Eric, I know you were talking about him in your 3 bets in 3 minutes. Do you think that he could be a future star as well?
kind of hilarious that I had that fight to go to decision based on those two fights. I was like, they're teammates. They know each other well. There's going to be familiarity. And who knows? They might be friends. Maybe they're not going to want to beat the brakes off each other. And holy
So
God,
funny.
I mean, that was fight of the. I mean, I don't want to say fight of the year because it was a co-main event on a low-level Apex card. But in terms of just output and violence, it's one of the more violent fights that we've seen this year, for sure. Chris Duncan and Rebecca, I believe, pronounced
Rumbeski.
Rumbeski.
It's a nightmare.
Um, he
Can't fault
not
you
a
on
lot
that
of
one.
defense, not a lot of defense. And I scored I don't know how you scored the fight, Scott, but I didn't have Duncan winning. I thought unanimous was kind of a crazy decision, but regardless, fun fight. In terms of outlook for Duncan, I'd say pretty solid. I would definitely be looking for a higher ranked opponent on the next one, and I think that his striking can carry over, and takedown defense wasn't bad either. So.
I don't know what his ceiling is in terms of becoming a star. I don't necessarily see him breaking through in any gigantic way, as far as star power for Chris Duncan. But you know what? Hey, I'll give you this brawl of the year. Maybe I don't know if it was fight
Yeah.
of the year, but let's say brawl of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair one.
Already, I'm definitely have to rewatch that one. To be completely honest, I didn't make it home in time for that one, but I've heard some very good things, so I gotta catch that one over.
You'll have fun.
I'm expecting I
Yeah.
will. Alrighty, so we're a little bit low on time, so we're gonna run through this one, but I don't think we'll have a ton to say about this weekend. Another one in the Apex, Roman Dolidze taking on Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. That's 4 p.m. Eastern prelim, 7 p.m. main card. ESPN and ESPN Plus. For a UFC Apex show, how much do you think this headliner moves the needle, Scott?
Not much. It doesn't really. I'll say more than some, but less than others. It's more than the last week, which obviously was an unfortunate last, late notice kind of putting together a fight. So I'm not going to fault the UFC for that. I think they booked an interesting fight that fell apart. This one, it's less than the original fight last week, but more than what we got because at least Fluffy Hernandez, he is ascendant. We are seeing someone who potentially can get himself into that title picture with a win here. Really, that would start leaping him. I don't know, it'll be a title shot next, but he's gets into that very smaller conversation at middleweight to be a potential challenger to Dricus du Plessis. There's also Roman Dolidze on the other side. I just don't have much here. He seems like he's kind of spinning the wheels a little bit, kind of holding serve here. I don't know if this is going to be a launching point for him the same way. So I don't know. It's middle of the road for Apex card. I'll give you that.
What do you think about this warehouse fight, Eric?
Uh, Scott used to say, these are some fights. These are some fights. This is pretty much what this weekend had. Some fights.
There we go. Alrighty.
I borrowed that from Ben Folks as well. So
Oh,
we'll
there we go.
Okay.
Shout out to Ben
I was
Folks.
trying to steal from you.
No, I got it from somewhere else.
It's a chain of
Fair
stealing. No,
Yes.
no. But let's talk about some of these fights. Scott, what's your fight to watch?
Miles Johns, John Matsumoto. I want that one.
Eric, how about you?
Fantastic.
John or Gene. I might have said John, but yeah.
It's we're taking this week off on our pronunciation. Eric, what about you?
Just
butchering it left and right. Gilbert Urbina versus Euros Medic. Medic, big favorite, kind of surprised. But grappling heavy. Urbina, don't dislike his takedown defense, and I think the striking is going to be competitive. I think that it's going to be a banger. I mean, it's not expected to go to decision. It's like minus 425 to end inside the distance. It should be violent, should be fun, and yeah.
Alrighty, and Scott, it is that time. It is event rating time for this fight in the Apex. I actually have high hopes for this one. What is it?
This is a 44.
I
guys.
knew it.
It is a huge one as far as top to bottom card. The main event, not so special. The co-main also not gigantic, but here's what it is. Every single fight, top to bottom, features at least one fighter in the top 100.
Wow.
You never see that. You don't see that on any card. And a lot of these fights are two top 100s or much higher, right? There's really not a whole lot of talent on this card that doesn't belong in the UFC. So you got to give it to them. It's a very deep card. This is one in terms of importance and fights where people are really going places and not just watching, a fight that you could certainly have watched on a very capable CFFC card. Then this is definitely a lot more. It feels like a UFC card at the very least with a substandard main event.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, there you go. So the quality is high in terms of the competition.
That's shocking. I didn't think it'd be that high.
I was looking at the list and I was like, God, you know what? I know all these names,
Right.
or at least a very high amount of them. So I was like,
100%.
I feel like
That's
this one's
what
gonna
it
be high.
is. That's what it is.
Scott, I'm going to throw it over to you for quick hits.
And we don't have too many quick hits this week, but won't lead off with a good one. Charles Oliveira is going to fight Rafael Fiziev. The fight just got announced by the UFC. Going to headline their October 11 show in Rio de Janeiro. Quick turnaround for Oliveira coming off a knockout. It's interesting to see that. On the other way, we are losing a fight with Raquel Pennington having to withdraw from her planned fight against Norma Dumont. That was going to take place at UFC Noche on September 13th. No more. We have a welcome back to the UFC for Kyle Dawkins, the Darce Knight, who is he's been on a hot run with CFFC as the middleweight champion. He's back in the UFC, and he will take a short notice fight on August 23rd against Michel Pereira over in Shanghai. Last one for you. I'm going to give you one more quick one here. Dustin Poirier is already back in the UFC, guys, as a desk analyst at UFC 319 next Saturday. Not his first time, but maybe a sign that there will be more to come in his post-fighting career.
Won't be the last we see from him.
He was very good when he was doing like one-offs, so that's great. Good job for him. I got one more to throw in. Jake Paul, everyone's favorite, is suing everybody who has ever said that his fights are fixed. So yeah, I had that little scoop earlier this week, and it's not the craziest scoop ever, but it was something I reported, and that is something I just wanted to say. He's suing everybody, so don't talk. Careful. He has a lawyer.
His fights are not fixed.
Okay.
But they are carefully chosen in a way that will allow him to look good.
I think we're safe. Okay. Let's move on to the final round. Now, something that we were a little bit puzzled about last week is the choice of fight for Scott Smith versus Kung Lee. Eric and I watched the wrong fight because there were two of them.
They fought twice.
Yep. We watched the wrong one, and we can safely say that the correct one from Strikeforce Evolution, Kung Lee versus Scott Smith one was
the original one.
Yes, it was a much more competitive fight than the second one. So
and compelling, I think. I mean, we saw Scott Smith was getting beat to heck, and then by the end, I mean, he's got Kung Lee bloodied and sitting down in the cage for his first loss. That was kind of an interesting thing. It wasn't like a giant fight, but it was cool.
Yes.
It was kind of perfect actually. Watching the second one and then watching the first one, the first two rounds of the first one were going the same as the second fight.
Yeah.
And then Scott Smith with a crazy comeback. Good for him. That was the celebration afterwards was pretty awesome too. Very emotional celebration. Kung Lee is busted up. Scott, one thing I said last week before we wrap, Strikeforce's production quality was excellent. This predates my time in the MMA world. Can I ask you, did Strikeforce steal from UFC in your opinion, or did UFC steal from Strikeforce? Because the production quality is out of this world from Strikeforce.
Strikeforce stole from Showtime Boxing, which is where the network it aired on. That's where it comes from. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the UFC. They did their own thing, their own way, the way the boxing did it. They were just doing that.
Interesting, because even the way Strikeforce does the pre-fight interviews, I thought it echoed, it gave me UFC vibes. And I had to look up when did Strikeforce get bought out by UFC, and I was trying to figure out where the similarity comes from.
Could it have been the other way?
Right.
Who knows?
That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
One thing I thought was cool too, I just want to throw out there too, the crowd, you hear them a lot more when you're watching a Strikeforce fight. The sound mixing that you have during a lot of UFC shows, it's much lower. And I don't think you get some of those giant roars that they're always describing on TV. Sometimes you do, and a lot of times you don't. But I think when you watch the Strikeforce fight, if they were roaring, you heard them.
Important clarification. I like that. Well, comparing the two from Strikeforce and UFC, we did have a UFC fight that we also had for our homework. Miesha Tate versus Ronda Rousey, or should I say Ronda Rousey versus Miesha Tate 2. Grappler's delight, I would like to label it. Fantastic. Eric, I know you love your jiu-jitsu. Scott, you as well. What did you think about this one, Eric?
Yeah, Ronda, the grappling was fantastic. I think Miesha Tate, after rewatching that, especially rewatching it now, she would get up out of guard. She got out of guard at least once. She, just stood up immediately, and I was like, "Oh no, why'd you get up there? You stay there." It's you're fine. You could pressure her, tire her out, something. She got up, and then she gets taken down again, and then it's another submission threat. So, really interesting, and not in a weird way. Ronda Rousey's hips are unbelievable. Her ability to stop, to just contort her body in different ways to get an arm bar, set up a triangle.
The judo
Unbelievable.
too, man. Insane.
Unbelievable stuff. Man, she was
I
fun.
heard
And
Ronda
even
Rousey
like,
was a decent judoka.
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
She was before my time though, so this is why these homework assignments are important.
No,
That was why I
she's
picked this
done
one. I picked this one because it was competitive enough that we didn't see that a lot with Ronda. She went on a very
right.
dominant run after this, and I wanted you, Jake, to be able to see this was her in a way that she actually was challenged. I could probably give you one of those Shane Carwin experience style things with Ronda, and you could bang it out in 5 minutes.
I would like that
Right.
actually.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next homework assignment. What are we looking at?
For this coming week, I'm giving you guys TJ Dillashaw against Dominic Cruz, which was on a fight night card in 2016, of all things. This was a bantamweight championship fight on Fox Sports 1, guys.
Wow.
It wasn't even on
Bring it back.
Fox.
Bring
Yeah,
it back.
yeah, for real, right? This is a relic of a different time. But just to give you a quick little bit of setup, Dillashaw had the title at this point. He was considered a very, very impressive champion by now, having fully gotten through Renan Barão. But the reason Barão had it is because he had an interim belt that was created when Cruz had to give up his title because of various injuries. So he never lost the belt. This was him going to try and get back what never was really taken from him.
Alrighty, very interesting. I'm excited to watch that one. Love bantamweight fights. Love Dominic Cruz and TJ Dillashaw. Like the old fights. So that's why we do this. But speaking of that, Scott, give us our this week in MMA before we wrap up.
Before we wrap, and I think we actually talked about this fight earlier this year. I think that was one of our homework assignments. August 7th,
Yes.
2010. UFC 117, Anderson Silva stuns Chael Sonnen in an all-time comeback to retain the middleweight title. That was this day, guys. 15 years ago.
Wow. There we go. Alrighty. Well, I think that ties a bow on this episode of Against the Cage. Erich and Scott, thank you guys for joining me. As always, I am very much looking forward to those fight assignments. And you at home, let us know in the comments what you thought of your homework assignments. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Adios.